If we really believe that people can govern themselves, then what we're talking about today is a strategy to address war and peace, foreign policy, healthcare, transportation, environment. What we're talking about today is a strategy that addresses all of those issues because it is talking about a democracy movement. If we could think for a minute about the word strategy, in Veterans for Peace and a lot of movements, we hear that word a lot. But if we really think about it, what do activists typically do? And this is not a criticism, maybe a constructive criticism, but we are experts at organizing people to get out to rallies, to petition, to write letters, to make phone calls, to picket, to do all sorts of stuff, civil disobedience, boycotts, strikes, all of the things that we have become really quite good at doing. But none of those things are strategies. Those are tactics, and they're wonderful tactics, but they are tactics that we use to resist whatever crap the madmen arsonists are coming up with. And resisting is incredibly important. I mean, people a lot more articulate than I am, like Chris Hedges, talks a lot about the importance of resisting, whether or not we can see an end result or a success or whatever, just the importance of being out there and openly and loudly resisting what the empire is doing. That's extremely important. I don't want to minimize that. But it's resisting, it's responding, it's reacting, it's defensive. And if we're ever going to govern ourselves, we need to move beyond resisting and reacting to whatever the madmen arsonists are setting fire to today and tomorrow. We need to move beyond that to figuring out how are we going to govern ourselves. And that means basically, how are we going to run this country, because we don't run it now. I think just about everybody that's tuned in here will admit that we, the people, has been forever since we governed this country. And in fact, the Constitution was set up so that we wouldn't govern the country. But the point being that even more than ever, our country is run by an elite, by an autocracy, by the oligarchs, whatever you want to call it, but it's run by a very small group of people who have incredible economic and political power, and they set our policies. And that's what is fundamentally different about this approach of democracies and corporations. Or Veterans for Peace has got the Democracy and Peace Working Group. And what's fundamentally different about it is that we're saying it's important to resist what the empire's doing in Palestine or Iraq or Afghanistan or fill in the blank. It's important to resist the development of nuclear weapons. It's important to resist the privatization of healthcare, all these sorts of things. But if we're going to be able to actually govern ourselves and have democratic power and principles make policy in this country, we're going to have to figure out a way to take governing power away from the corporations that now have it. And all of the wonderful resistance that we do, as important as that is, does not take one bit of power away from corporations to govern. I mean, we can boycott them as successfully as we want. We can strike. We can do all sorts of things, take our money out of the pension funds or take our pension funds out of investments in the weapons industry or, whichever industry we're talking about. But at the end of the day, after all of that work, corporations are just as able to use the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment to get their way, to write legislation. I mean, literally, write the legislation, to advertise. And we're not even talking yet about buying elections and lobbying. but those are two big ones. But all sorts of things. For example, the Fourth Amendment, protection against illegal search and seizure. I mean, these things were meant for human beings to protect them from government. And corporations got in, and the Supreme Court usurped these rights and applied them to corporations. So that's how crazy this has gotten. And what it means is we've got a culture that is corporatized. You know, it's militarized, as Veterans for Peace members know. And what we're hoping with this corporations and democracy move to amend the Veterans for Peace Democracy and Peace Working Group, what we're hoping is to build a culture not of consumerism or militarism, but a culture of democracy. And we had one in this country, not perfect by any means, but much more viable and important and powerful in days past. And there's no reason we can't have that culture of democracy again and have it start informing the work that we do on all sorts of individual issues. That's what I hope that this approach can bring to Veterans for Peace and other movements. Mm-hmm. But it only goes so far. It never talks about what do we have to do in order to turn this around, because we get story after story of how terrible these things are and the next truckload of data about how terrible things are. But we need to say, all right, then what are we going to do about it? And the short answer is to amend the Constitution to say that corporations are not persons and money is not speech. And that would get rid of these protections that corporations have usurped. It would get rid of money equaling speech, which is an insane idea. But that is the penultimate expression of this movement. If we don't talk about who's governing the country and how that fits in with the activism that we do, we'll never get there. And so that's why I'm hoping that we can broaden the conversations that activists have to include more of this. And that's not to say that you got to do one or the other. And I want to really make that clear, because sometimes people say, oh, you know, this is just another thing to work on. And if we work on this, who's going to speak out against the genocide in Gaza? No, you do them both at the same time. You know, and you can do both of them at the same time. And it makes more sense to people, because you're talking about, here's the problem, here's what we got to do, but here's why this problem has gotten so bad.
So you've been working, this group has been working on this for decades?
Yeah, since the early 90s.
Since the early 90s. So what progress have you made so far?
Well, out of that initial group called the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy came two, I think, pretty important organizations, one of which was Move to Amend. And the people who organized Move to Amend and have kept it going were people who were educated by the research and the analysis that POCLAD did. And they have gone on to actually work for amending the Constitution. And last congressional session, they had 94 or 5 members of the House that endorsed the We the People amendment that says money is not speech and corporations are not people. And every year, every session of Congress, that's got to get reintroduced. And it's a hell of a big job, because you've got to get a supermajority of Congress has got to pass that, and then a supermajority of the states have got to adopt it, which is the same thing that women went through to get the right to vote. So it's not like, we've never done this before, but it is extremely difficult. And the people that wrote the Constitution made it that way. And in the current climate, it's probably even more difficult, because money has reduced the scope of the political consciousness of elected representatives to where it's even more difficult. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. And it doesn't mean that we should forget about it, because we'll simply be putting out fires the rest of our life if we don't try to get to the basis of it. So that's
Yeah.
what Move to Amend is doing. They've had close to 500,000 people sign a petition to Congress to say we need this We the People amendment. They've got affiliates around the country, and they're engaged in the same kinds of activities of Veterans for Peace and other movement groups are engaged in, to try to do public education and awareness and get people involved and that kind of thing. No corporation has got a constitutional right to the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment or 14th Amendment, any of that stuff. So it's up to the public to decide. And it means a lot more work for us. I mean, if we're going to have a really participatory democracy,
Mhm.
regular people have got to be involved as citizens. If we are quote governing ourselves, that means there's work involved. And if you want to sit back and have the people who can afford to hire lobbyists and have the system that we've got now, it depends on an elite. It depends on a lot of money, and decisions get made for us. So this isn't some kind of magic wand. What we're saying is we want the opportunity to do this hard work of democracy. We want the opportunity to do it. We want to govern ourselves.
And so, where can people find more information about what you're talking about?
Well, they can find Move to Amend at movetoamend.org, and they can find Veterans for Peace, Democracy and Peace Working Group on our website. But it's also, if you take a look at our homepage, it was there last time I looked, on that slider on the very top of the homepage. I asked them to put up, and I think it's still there, one of the 6 or 7 things on our slider, which is the most important real estate on our website, is a cartoon of an eagle writing "Let's try democracy." And if you click on that, it takes you to the Democracy and Peace Working Group page.
Is there anything you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say?
I think only to reiterate that I am personally, and this movement is not saying that we have to stop doing the sorts of resistance tactics and activities that we've been doing. We're not saying that at all. What we're saying is we think we need to bring in on parallel tracks this other perspective of who's governing the country and what we need to do so we can start governing it to prevent these fires from breaking out and being set all over the world. And those things have to be done at the same time.